I know what I saw, Oliver. And it wasn't an accident. Her voice was cold, but it wasn't Penelope speaking. It was her best friend Charlotte, standing in my own kitchen, like she owned the place. She had that smug little smile that said she thought she knew exactly what I should do with my marriage. And in that moment, I knew she was about to destroy it. It was a Friday night. I'd just come off a brutal 48-hour shift at the firehouse, my muscles aching, my mind running on fumes. All I wanted was to collapse into bed next to my wife. But instead, I walked in on Charlotte leaning against the counter, wine glass in hand, whispering to Penelope. "You deserve more than this," she murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. "You need someone exciting, someone who'll make you feel alive again." Penelope's eyes flicked to me, then away. No smile, no warmth, just hesitation. I froze in the doorway. My hands tightened around the strap of my gear bag. I wasn't supposed to hear that. I wasn't supposed to know. But once you hear a sentence like that, once you see that look, you can't unhear it, can't unsee it. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying it. The way Charlotte's hand lingered on Penelope's arm, the way Penelope didn't push her away, the way they both lowered their voices when I stepped closer. I'd been through house fires that left nothing standing but twisted beams and black ash, but I'd never felt a spark of dread quite like that. I didn't know it yet, but Charlotte's poison had already started to seep into the foundation of my marriage, and the cracks were about to split wide open. Before we go deeper into this story, tell me in the comments, have you ever had a friend ruin a relationship? And make sure you subscribe and hit that like button so you don't miss the ending of this one. Because trust me, it's going to burn. It started small, so small I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Penelope used to greet me at the door, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek before asking about my day. Now, she barely looked up from her phone. The dinners we used to share my favorite. Her slow-roasted chicken turned into takeout boxes left on the counter with a sticky note. Working late, don't wait up. And then there were the laughs. The ones I didn't get to hear anymore. I'd catch her in the living room, curled up with her phone, giggling in that way that once belonged to me, but when I asked what was funny, she'd just shake her head. Inside joke with Charlotte. Charlotte. Always Charlotte. I started noticing their little girl nights happening more often. Wine glasses clinking, whispered conversations behind closed doors, and glances in my direction that lasted just a beat too long. One night, I overheard them in the kitchen. Charlotte was saying, "Life's too short to be stuck in a routine. You need excitement, passion, maybe even someone who challenges you." Penelope laughed, a soft, almost guilty laugh, but she didn't disagree. My stomach tightened. I'd run into burning buildings without hesitation, but this creeping feeling of being shut out of my own marriage, it left me paralyzed. I tried to talk to her, tried to tell her I missed us. She nodded, said all the right words, but her eyes told a different story, a story I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. It was like watching a house fire from the sidewalk, smoke curling up through the windows, flames licking at the roof, and knowing you didn't have the right gear to go in and save it. I didn't know it yet, but the match had already been struck, and the blaze was coming for everything I thought was unshakable. It was a Thursday night when the shift became undeniable. I'd come home early, thinking maybe a surprise dinner would break through the distance. I even grabbed a bottle of Penelope's favorite wine, the one we'd shared on our honeymoon. But when I walked in, her laughter hit me like a slap. Not the warm, shared kind. This was sharp. Private. She and Charlotte were at the dining table, 2 glasses already empty, a third half full. Charlotte leaned in close, her voice low, but not low enough. "If you're unhappy, why pretend? You deserve someone who lights you up, not someone who just keeps the lights on." Penelope twirled her glass, eyes flicking toward me for a split second before darting away. "It's complicated," she murmured. Charlotte's smirk said otherwise. "No, it's not. You just need the courage to choose yourself for once." I stood there, groceries in hand, my chest tight. I wanted to call it out, ask why my marriage was being dissected over Merlot like some after-work gossip. but the words stuck. Instead, I set the bag on the counter slowly, deliberately, and left the room without a sound. Later that night, I heard her on the phone. Her voice was softer, almost shy, in a way I hadn't heard in months. "Yeah, I'll see you. Just not tonight. He's here." The pit in my stomach solidified. I wasn't just losing her. I was already gone. Over the next week, Charlotte's visits multiplied. Sometimes she stayed past midnight. Sometimes she and Penelope left together. No explanations offered. I told myself I needed proof, something undeniable, before I confronted her. But deep down, I knew the proof was already staring me in the face every time she smiled at her phone. And then came the night she didn't come home at all. The clock read 2:17 a.m. when I finally stopped pacing. I'd called her twice. No answer. Texted her 4 times. Delivered. Read. No reply. Every sound outside made me check the window, first a car door, then distant laughter from the street below. But none of it was her. By 3 a.m., my mind had stopped pretending. I wasn't worried about her safety. I was worried about how far she'd gone, and with whom. At 6:42 a.m., the front door opened. Penelope slipped inside like a teenager sneaking past curfew. She froze when she saw me on the couch. Her hair was messy, her makeup smudged. The dress was wrinkled, like she'd slept in it. "Where were you?" My voice was steady, but my hands were clenched so tight the skin on my knuckles was white. She hesitated. "With Charlotte." The lie was so casual it almost made me laugh. "Try again." She dropped her purse on the table, avoiding my eyes. I needed space. Things had been tense. Space? I stepped closer. Or someone? That's when her phone buzzed. On the screen, a name lit up. Jason. She flinched. I didn't shout. I didn't demand answers. I just walked away. Because in that moment, I realized something. She thought I was still fighting for her. She thought I'd break, forgive, and become the safe fallback I'd always been. She had no idea I was already planning my next move, one that would take away not just her escape, but the safety net she was counting on when it all fell apart. I didn't confront her again. Not about the texts. Not about the lies. That's what she expected. A blow-up. Tears. The kind of messy fight where both sides say things they regret, and somehow she walks away the victim. No, I wanted her comfortable. Complacent. While Penelope scrolled through her phone, smiling at messages she thought I couldn't see, I started taking inventory. Not of our relationship, but of her world. Her bank accounts. Her car loan. The lease. In my name. Her health insurance. Even the streaming services she used every night without thinking. One by one, I traced every string back to me. The more I looked, the more I realized Penelope didn't own much of anything. Her friend Charlotte had convinced her she was independent, free to explore her options. But in reality, she was living in a house she didn't pay for, driving a car I insured, coasting on a lifestyle she could never afford on her own salary. I started making changes, tiny ones she wouldn't notice. Moving my paycheck to a different account, setting up new passwords, transferring ownership of things I'd bought before we were married into my sole name. All perfectly legal, all invisible. At night, I'd lie next to her and listen to her breathing, wondering if she had any idea that the safety net she thought was hers was already unraveling. When she smiled at her phone again, I smiled too, because I knew soon that smile would fade. The first real move was subtle, too subtle for her to notice. I canceled the automatic renewal for her car insurance. It was still weeks away from expiring, but I knew she never checked the mail, and the company would send the notice straight to her. By the time she saw it, the rate would have skyrocketed without my multi-policy discount. Then I reviewed the lease. Our lease. Technically, mine alone. Penelope had never bothered to add her name. One quiet afternoon, I gave notice to the landlord 30 days. I'd already secured a short-term place for myself, a small one-bedroom closer to work. She'd be left scrambling. I didn't stop there. I rerouted our joint account's direct deposits into my personal bank. Every bill that was in my name, utilities, internet, streaming services, was transferred or closed. One by one, the pillars of her comfort started disappearing, but in ways that looked like normal changes from the outside. Penelope still went out with Charlotte on Friday nights, coming home late, smelling of expensive perfume I didn't recognize. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't need to. I could see the whole endgame forming in front of me. She thought she was in control, but every brick in her safety net was mine to remove. One night, I watched her laugh into her phone, oblivious, while I quietly folded the final piece of paperwork, something she wouldn't see coming until it was too late. It started small, a flicker of confusion in her eyes, when she came home and the Wi-Fi was down. She rattled off complaints, assuming it was the provider, but I just shrugged and said I'd look into it. In reality, the account was already closed. 2 days later, she mentioned a late fee notice for her car insurance. I pretended to be surprised, tilting my head like I couldn't imagine how it happened. She mumbled something about calling them, but I knew she'd let it slide until it became a real problem. The real blow came when she stopped by the leasing office to pick up a package and the manager casually mentioned my move-out date. When I got home, she was pacing the living room, arms crossed, demanding answers. I stayed calm, even sipping my coffee between words. "We're not staying here, Penelope." I gave notice. Her voice went sharp, almost panicked. "Without telling me?" I set my cup down slowly. "I didn't think it mattered. You're not on the lease." That shut her up for a moment. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. She stormed off to call Charlotte, and I could hear muffled swearing from the bedroom. Each day after that, her veneer cracked a little more. She double-checked the mail, asked about bills, tried to log into the joint account only to find it empty. And still, I didn't raise my voice, didn't confront her about the cheating. That part didn't need my energy anymore. This was about balance, about making sure the woman who thought she could play me understood exactly how much of her life I'd been holding together and what it looked like when I stopped. By the second week, the tension in the apartment felt like wet cement, thick, heavy, impossible to wade through without leaving marks. Penelope had gone from icy silence to frantic energy, rifling through drawers, digging through old mail, as if she could somehow reverse what was already in motion. The cracks became chasms the morning she tried to use the shared credit card, and it got declined. She came storming into the kitchen, waving her phone like it was a weapon. "Why is this closed?" I didn't even look up from my plate, because I paid it off and shut it down. "We don't need it anymore." Her voice cracked. "I need it." There it was, the real fear, raw and unfiltered. Not about losing me, but about losing the comfort I'd built for her. She started making calls, loud and desperate, to her friend, Charlotte, to her mother, to anyone who might give her a way out. But I could hear it in her tone. She wasn't getting the answers she wanted. The safety net she thought she had was full of holes. By Friday, she was pacing constantly, like a caged animal. "We need to talk," she blurted, cornering me in the living room. I set my laptop aside and looked at her. "No, Penelope, you need to listen." I laid it out, piece by piece, the bills I'd been paying, the rent I'd covered, the way I'd kept her life from unraveling for years. I told her how I knew about the affair, how I'd read the messages she thought she'd hidden. And then I told her, calmly and without a hint of hesitation, "This is what life looks like without me," I said. "Get used to it." She didn't reply. She just stood there, breathing hard, and I could see the moment it hit her. There was no undoing this. By Monday, the apartment didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like a waiting room she was trapped in, counting the minutes until her number was called. Penelope barely spoke, except for clipped questions about the mail or short updates that sounded more like complaints. I came home that evening to find her sitting on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes. She didn't look up when I stepped in. "I can't keep this place," she said flatly. "Rent's due in 2 weeks, and I can't cover it." I leaned against the doorway. "Then you'll need to find somewhere you can." She looked at me then, eyes red but not from crying, more from exhaustion. "You're really just going to watch me fall apart?" I held her gaze. "No, Penelope. I'm going to watch you finally take responsibility for the mess you made." Her mouth trembled, but no words came. She just turned back to the box in front of her, shoving in clothes without folding them. Over the next few days, I watched her unravel in slow motion. Calls went unanswered. Texts stopped pinging. The woman who once seemed so sure of herself was now avoiding mirrors. And I realized something. I didn't feel pity anymore, just clarity. Friday morning, she left with 2 suitcases. No goodbye, no dramatic speech. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence that followed felt like a breath I'd been holding for years. I stood in the center of the living room, looked around, and smiled. The space was mine again, not because she was gone, but because I had finally chosen me. The first night alone, I cooked myself dinner without rushing. I ate slowly, no phone in hand, no eyes darting to the door, wondering when someone would barge in with another demand or excuse. The quiet wasn't empty, it was full of something I hadn't felt in years. Control. I walked through each room like I was reclaiming territory that had been occupied for too long. Every shelf, every drawer, every single thing here was mine because I'd earned it, not because someone handed it to me, not because I was trying to hold a life together that was never mine to begin with. And in that stillness, I understood the real victory wasn't that Penelope was gone. It was that I'd stopped living in a story where my worth was tied to how much I could endure. She had her choices, and I had mine. So I locked the door, turned off the lights, and finally slept without the weight of someone else's mistakes pressing on my chest. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or treated like you just figure it out, no matter what this story is for you, sometimes the best revenge isn't fire or fury. It's walking away with your dignity intact and letting the consequences speak for themselves. Now, I want to hear from you. What's the most satisfying justice or revenge story you've ever seen in real life? Drop it in the comments. Hit that like button if you felt this ending in your soul. And subscribe for more true stories where karma comes knocking louder than expected.